Captain Ethan Ward had spent most of his life among humans, building and fixing machines that could travel to distant planets. He was an engineer by training and an explorer by choice. When the United Earth Coalition called him to lead a small team to the distant frontier world of Virelon, he saw it as another mission, one that could change his career and maybe the future of humanity. Virelon was a planet of stark contrasts. Its deserts glowed under twin suns while jagged mountains hid deep valleys filled with strange bioluminescent plants. Rumors among the spacefarers spoke of the Virelians, an intelligent alien race that had thrived for centuries yet remained mysterious. They were known for their beauty, intelligence, and above all their secrecy. For humans, that secrecy was both alluring and dangerous. Ethan's team landed on the surface in a small, reinforced shuttle. They were greeted by a silent wind that carried a faint metallic scent. Their mission was simple: negotiate for access to Virelon crystals, rare energy sources crucial to Earth's expanding colonies. But as soon as they left the shuttle, the air shimmered and shadows moved unnaturally. Ethan's instincts screamed that something was wrong. Out of the shadows, tall figures emerged. They had smooth, shimmering skin that reflected the sunlight, and their eyes glowed faintly like liquid silver. They were humanoid in shape, but their presence carried a weight that Ethan could feel in his chest, a mixture of intelligence and authority that made him instinctively cautious. At their head stood a woman. Her hair, long and dark, seemed to move slightly even though the wind was calm. Her gaze was sharp and curious. She stepped forward and her voice, melodic yet firm, cut through the desert air. "I am Commander Sira," she said. "You have come to take what belongs to Virelon. Why?" Ethan stepped forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "We come in peace. We seek crystals to help our people survive. We can trade knowledge, technology, anything you need in return." Sira studied him for a moment. Then, as if weighing every word, she spoke again. "The crystals are not just minerals. They are tied to the life of this planet and my people. Humans are fragile. You do not understand what you ask." Ethan nodded. "We understand enough to ask. We do not mean to harm your world." Sira's expression softened slightly, but the tension remained. "There is another way," she said. "You, human. You could help us. You could become part of the solution." Ethan frowned. "Part of the solution?" "I'm a human, Commander." "I don't understand." Sira's eyes glowed brighter. "We are dying. Our people are losing the ability to survive on this planet. Your genetic structure, it carries something we lack. You could help us continue." Ethan's stomach tightened. The implication was clear, though she did not say it outright. "You mean, you want me to breed with you?" he asked carefully, unwilling to sound rude but needing to be clear. Sira's gaze held his without shame or hesitation. "Yes, it is the way of survival. Not personal. Not preference, necessity." Ethan swallowed hard. He was trained to handle high-pressure situations, but this was different. It was personal, cultural, and ethical all at once. I can't," he said finally. "I'm sorry. I cannot do that." The silence that followed was heavy. The other Virelians shifted slightly, their glowing eyes now sharper, colder. Ethan realized he had crossed a line. In their culture, refusal was more than personal rejection. It was defiance, even insult. "You refuse?" Sira asked, her voice calm but with an edge of steel. "I refuse," Ethan said again. "I cannot compromise my choices or my people's morals." For a long moment she did not speak. Then she nodded slowly, as if acknowledging both his courage and his disobedience. "Very well, human. You will remain with us." Ethan barely had time to react before he was surrounded and gently restrained by several Virelian guards. They led him to a nearby crystalline structure, smooth and glowing faintly from within. It was not a prison in the human sense, no bars, no steel. Yet he felt trapped. Inside, the walls seemed to pulse with a soft light, responding to his movements. He tried the doors. They did not budge, he shouted. But no one came to answer except Sira, who appeared at the far end of the chamber. "You are not my prisoner," she said softly, though her eyes made him feel otherwise. "You are under observation. This is for your safety." "And ours," Ethan paced. "Observation? I am an engineer, not a criminal. I don't belong here." Sira tilted her head. "You do not understand our people. We cannot risk your departure until we know your mind, your heart. You are human, and humans are unpredictable. That unpredictability is both a threat and a gift." Over the next few days, Ethan realized the truth. He was not being locked away to punish him, nor to force him into submission. His cell was more like a study chamber, designed to watch and understand him. Every movement he made, every choice he exercised, was noted. Yet Sira visited him regularly, asking questions, sharing stories of her people, their history, their fears. It was during these visits that Ethan began to see the complexity of Sira. She was beautiful, yes, and commanding, but also burdened. Her people's survival rested on decisions she had no choice but to make. When she spoke of dying children, of people fading away, her voice trembled just slightly, enough that Ethan saw not a leader, but someone trapped by duty. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert, Ethan tried to test the boundaries. He found a loose panel in his chamber and attempted to pry it open with a small tool he had smuggled from his workbench. The panel budged slightly, but before he could act further, Sira appeared silently behind him. "You do not need to escape, Ethan," she said. Her voice was quiet but carried authority. "Even if you leave, the problem you refuse to see will follow you. Your choices have consequences." Ethan froze, realizing she was right. You mean the survival of your people?" Sira nodded. "Yes, and perhaps more. You humans carry something we lost long ago. The strength to refuse, the courage to say no. Yet that same courage can also be a weapon, if you choose to use it wisely." That night, Ethan could not sleep. The twin moons rose over Virelon, and he stared at them, thinking. He had refused Sira's offer because it violated his principles, yet he now understood that the refusal came with cost. He was not just a visitor here, and he was a participant in a drama far bigger than himself. Days turned into weeks. Ethan repaired machines, studied alien texts, and learned the rhythms of Virelian life. Guards watched him, but Sira often came with questions about Earth, its people, its ways, its spirit. She laughed once when he described baseball, and he noticed the faintest warmth in her eyes. It was confusing. Here was a woman who had the power to command his life, yet she sought to understand it. And through it all, Ethan realized a strange truth. He was her prisoner, yet not a captive in the conventional sense. He was a human in a world that needed his choices, his courage, his morality, and perhaps in ways he did not yet understand, his heart. Ethan did not know what would happen next. The mission had gone wrong the moment they landed. He could no longer think of this as a simple negotiation. This was survival, morality, and trust intertwined. And at the center of it all was Commander Sira, the woman he had refused, the woman who now held the keys to his fate, and the woman whose curiosity about humanity might save or doom them both. The desert winds howled outside his chamber, carrying whispers of a future he could not yet see. Yet Ethan Ward, human and steadfast, knew one thing with certainty. He would not give up his choices, even if the world he now lived in tried to force him to, and that was just the beginning. Days on Virelon passed slowly for Ethan Ward, each one blending into the next under the glowing twin suns. He had come as an explorer, a negotiator, and now he found himself a prisoner of circumstance, caught between human morality and alien necessity. Yet despite the chains of containment, the crystal chamber did not feel oppressive. It was more like a cage designed for observation than punishment. The walls shimmered gently, reflecting his movements, almost as if the chamber itself watched him as carefully as the Virelians did. Sira appeared daily, moving with quiet precision. She carried no weapons, no threats, only questions. At first, Ethan had been wary. Every word she spoke felt like a probe into his mind. But gradually he realized her curiosity was genuine, even compassionate. She wanted to understand humans, and perhaps she wanted him to understand her people too. "You seem troubled today," Sira observed one morning, her silver eyes reflecting the light from the chamber walls. Her voice carried a calm authority, but there was an unmistakable softness beneath it. Ethan leaned against the wall, rubbing the back of his neck. "I keep thinking about your people, and what you asked me to do. I can't ignore it. But I also can't agree. It's difficult." He struggled for words. He had refused her request, and yet it lingered in his thoughts like a shadow that refused to leave. "I didn't come here to play God," he added finally, his voice low. Sira nodded, seemingly understanding. "You misunderstand us. I did not ask you out of personal desire. My people are dying. Our bodies cannot sustain life the way they once could. Your genetics, they carry a resilience we no longer possess. That is why I offered. Her tone was factual, but Ethan sensed the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. He paused, studying her. For all her strength and intelligence, Sira bore a burden that he could see in her eyes. So you are trapped? He asked quietly. Not by me, but by what your people need. She looked away, gazing at the crystal walls as if searching for answers in their light. In a way, yes. Leadership carries its own prison. I am forced to consider paths I would not choose for myself. Ethan found himself sympathizing with her. Here was a woman commanding a civilization, struggling against time and biology itself, and she had chosen to bring him into that struggle. And what happens if I continue to refuse? He asked cautiously. Are you angry at me? Sira's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. Anger is unhelpful. I expected defiance. In fact, I respect it. You are human, and humans have a courage my people sometimes forget. Despite the tense circumstances, Ethan felt a flicker of relief. Respect, even faint, was better than fear. Yet the question of what he could do to help, without violating his own principles, haunted him. The days passed and Ethan settled into a routine. He repaired machinery, examined alien devices, and slowly learned the language of his captors. The guards, once silent and intimidating, became indifferent observers of his work, but Sira remained always present, always curious. She would bring him meals, sometimes sit in silence while he worked, and occasionally ask him questions about Earth, its people, their history, their struggles. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the desert horizon, Ethan noticed Sira lingering longer than usual. She watched him with a mix of intensity and hesitation. Tell me, she said quietly, what is it that makes humans fight even when the odds are impossible? Ethan paused, considering. I don't know. Maybe it's hope. Maybe it's stubbornness. Maybe we fight because giving up is worse than failing. You don't stop even when it's easier to turn away. Sira's eyes softened, reflecting the silver light of the moons. That is something my people have lost, she admitted. We plan, we calculate, we endure, but we no longer fight with the heart. Perhaps that is why we needed you. Not just your genetics, but your humanity. Ethan felt a strange sense of connection in her words. Here was a being from an entirely different world, revealing vulnerability, showing trust. It was unnerving, and yet it was also comforting. He began to realize that Sira's strength did not come from dominance, but from responsibility, the weight of a civilization resting on her decisions. Yet not all was calm. The Varelian Council, an assembly of elders and leaders, grew suspicious of Ethan's influence on Sira. Reports came to her, warning that he was too unpredictable, too human, and therefore a risk. The council demanded that he be restricted further, that Sira ensure he could not interfere with their people's traditions. When the council summoned her, Sira returned with a quiet fury in her eyes. They demand that I imprison him completely, she said, pacing the chamber. They say his influence is dangerous. Ethan watched, concerned, as she fought with the weight of leadership. What will you do? He asked, trying not to sound too hopeful. She paused, her back straightening. I will not harm him. Not for their sake, not for mine. My people may require sacrifices, but I will not sacrifice my conscience. Days later, a test came. Ethan was instructed to examine a device connected to the planet's life support systems, a complex mechanism that regulated the health of the Varelian environment. Sira accompanied him, her presence both reassuring and commanding. You must understand, she said as they worked. This machine is crucial. Without it, the planet suffers and my people will suffer with it. Ethan nodded. I understand, but I also know that forcing me to act against my principles will solve nothing. I need to work voluntarily or I will fail. Sira studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Then you shall act as a partner, not a tool. Together they repaired the machine, their work synchronized despite the differences in language, biology, and thought. Ethan realized something profound. Cooperation did not require agreement on every principle. It required trust, respect, and willingness to face a problem together. Over time, Ethan's understanding of the Varelians deepened. He saw children born weak and fragile, unable to thrive under the harsh environment. He saw adults whose lives were measured in careful calculations rather than freedom. And he understood Sirah's desperation. The reason she had offered him not just partnership, but a path to survival for her people. One evening, Sirah approached him quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "You believe I am your captor," she said softly. "And yet I bring you sustenance, teach you, guide you. Why do you trust me so little?" Ethan thought for a moment, then answered honestly. "Because I am human. I fear losing my freedom. I fear being used for something I cannot control. But I also see your honesty, and that makes it harder to hate you." Sirah's eyes glimmered with an emotion he could not name. Perhaps it was hope, perhaps gratitude, perhaps a faint spark of connection that transcended species. "Then perhaps we are not so different," she said. "Both trapped in duties we did not choose, both seeking a way forward." Ethan nodded slowly. He realized that captivity was more than physical. He was imprisoned not only by the crystal walls but by the choices of two worlds. And yet in understanding Sirah he found a strange form of freedom, the freedom to choose how he would respond, how he would act, and how he would survive. But danger was never far. Reports came of rogue factions within the Virelians, those who demanded stricter measures and feared the humans' presence. Rumors spoke of others who might take matters into their own hands if Ethan did not comply. Each day was a test of patience, intelligence, and courage. Ethan's heart raced every time he heard the footsteps of guards or the approach of the council. Yet he remained steadfast. He repaired, learned, observed, and understood. He realized that his refusal was not rejection but resistance. Resistance that might save a people, not just himself. And Sirah, she watched him. Not with anger, not with desire, not with dominance, but with respect. A commander bound by duty, observing the human who had refused her, yet stayed and now, perhaps unknowingly, had begun to change her world. The twin moons set, the desert winds whispering against the crystal walls. Ethan lay awake pondering the future. He was a prisoner in body but not in spirit, and somewhere, deep in the alien night, he sensed that the choices he made in the coming days could determine the fate of two worlds. The beginning of his journey had been one of resistance and fear, but as he drifted into a restless sleep, he realized the path ahead would require courage, intellect, and understanding, not just for survival, but for hope. Weeks had passed since Ethan Ward had first arrived on Virelon. He had settled into a routine within the crystal chamber, repairing machinery, studying alien devices, and learning about the Virelian culture. The more he learned, the more he understood the complexity of their world, a society thriving in beauty yet haunted by survival challenges he could barely comprehend. And through it all, Commander Sirah remained by his side, guiding, questioning, and observing. But peace was fragile. Rumors of dissent among the Virelian Council reached Sirah's ears. Some elders believed Ethan's presence threatened their traditions. Others whispered that a human could never truly understand Virelon, and that his influence on Sirah might lead to disaster. The council demanded stricter control over him. Sirah, however, refused. "He is not the enemy," she said quietly to herself as she walked among the glowing towers of her city. "He is a human, yes, but his mind, his courage, and his choices, these are not threats. They are lessons." One morning, Ethan was summoned to assist with the planet's energy grid. A vital crystal conduit had failed in the northern plateau, and without repair, the surrounding settlements would lose power. The mission was dangerous. The northern plateau was home to violent sandstorms and predatory creatures. Guards were instructed to accompany him, but Sirah insisted on joining. "You will need guidance," she said simply, her silver eyes scanning the horizon. "And I will not allow my people to send you alone into danger." Ethan hesitated. "Commander, this is dangerous. You should stay behind." Sirah's expression was firm. "I cannot. I am responsible for my people, and I am responsible for you. You refused my offer, but that does not make you expendable." Together they rode in a sleek, hovering vehicle, the wind whipping across the desert plains. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and swirling, and the air crackled with energy. Ethan felt a shiver of fear, not for himself, but for Sirah. She was commanding, brilliant, and strong, yet there was a vulnerability that no armor could hide. When they reached the plateau, the storm had intensified. Lightning danced across the sky, striking jagged rock formations and igniting the dry brush below. The crystal conduit lay broken, its energy output unstable and dangerous. Ethan's hands worked swiftly, guided by Sierra's precise instructions. Sparks flew, and the hum of alien energy pulsed beneath their feet. Suddenly, a surge of energy knocked the vehicle sideways, sending them both tumbling to the ground. Ethan scrambled to stabilize the conduit, ignoring the sting of wind and sand. Sierra was at his side instantly, her hand steady as she helped him reposition the energy nodes. "You are reckless," she scolded lightly, though the corners of her mouth betrayed a hint of amusement. "And you are fearless," he replied, grinning despite the danger. "We make a good team." Their shared laughter was brief. A predator, massive and shadowy, emerged from the storm, a creature native to Virelon's deserts. Its body shimmered in the lightning, and its glowing eyes locked onto them. Ethan froze, but Sierra remained calm, drawing a plasma tether from her belt. With careful precision, she lashed the creature's path, diverting it away from them. "You cannot face every danger with strength alone," she said, helping Ethan to his feet. "You must think, adapt, and trust your instincts." Ethan nodded, feeling a surge of admiration for her. She was not just a commander. She was a protector, a teacher, and perhaps a friend. And yet he could not ignore the growing tension in the air. The Council's warnings, the alien creatures, the storms. Every choice he made seemed to carry consequences far beyond himself. After hours of intense work, they repaired the conduit. Energy pulsed through the network once more, stabilizing the settlements below. Ethan wiped sweat and sand from his brow, feeling both relief and exhilaration. Sierra's gaze softened as she watched him work. "You handled yourself well," she said. "Not just your skill, but your courage. Your people's stubbornness serves you well." Ethan felt a strange warmth at her words. Recognition, respect. It was more valuable than praise from any human superior. Yet beneath the calm, he sensed an unspoken truth. Sierra's offer had not been forgotten. The Council still expected results, and he still faced the moral dilemma that had brought him here. Days later, Ethan and Sierra returned to the city. The Council had convened, their judgment looming over every interaction. Sierra presented the repairs, but the elders were skeptical. "Your actions are commendable," one elder said, his voice sharp. "Yet the human's presence continues to disrupt tradition. He must be contained for the good of our people." Sierra's eyes flashed with quiet defiance. "He is not a threat. He is a partner. His choices are his own, as are mine. We will not compromise our principles for fear." Ethan watched in awe. This alien woman, burdened with responsibility, stood against centuries of tradition for the sake of reason and morality. He realized that leadership was not about power. It was about courage, integrity, and the willingness to protect what mattered most, even against opposition. That night, Ethan was restless. He walked the corridors of his chamber, pondering his situation. He was still technically a prisoner, yet he had never felt so alive. His mind raced with possibilities: how to help Sierra, how to protect the Virelians, how to ensure he did not betray his own principles. And then, quietly, he admitted something to himself. He was beginning to trust her. The next day, danger arrived again, this time not from the storms or predators, but from rogue factions within the Council. A group of zealots attempted to seize control, insisting that Ethan be removed or neutralized. Alarms rang through the city, and the crystal walls of his chamber shimmered with emergency energy. Sierra acted swiftly. "Stay close," she instructed. "I will not let them harm you." Ethan followed, heart pounding as they navigated corridors filled with tension and glowing emergency lights. The factions had mobilized security drones, machines designed to neutralize threats efficiently and without mercy. Sierra commanded with precision, redirecting guards, shutting doors, and using the environment to their advantage. Ethan realized that he had a role to play too. His knowledge of engineering and human problem-solving allowed them to disable drones, reroute power, and create barriers where none existed. Together they moved like a single unit, human and Virelian, instinct and intellect intertwined. Finally, they reached a high observation deck. Below, the zealots had gathered, their intentions clear. Ethan could see that the situation could escalate into bloodshed if not handled carefully. Sierra turned to him. "We have a choice," she said quietly. "We can fight, but then we risk many lives. Or we can reason with them, show them a path they cannot refuse." Ethan nodded. "Then we reason." With careful words, she addressed the factions. She spoke of unity, survival, and the greater good. Ethan added his own observations, explaining human cooperation and moral choices. Together their voices carried reason into the chaos. Slowly the zealots hesitated, then withdrew, unable to argue against the logic of compassion and foresight. Sira exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "You are remarkable," she said, her eyes meeting his. "Not just your skill but your mind, your courage. I see now why my people's survival may depend on more than just tradition." Ethan felt a surge of pride, though tempered with humility. He had not sought recognition nor glory, only the chance to act according to his principles. And yet, standing beside Sira, he realized that their combined choices had changed the course of a civilization. As the moons rose again over Virelon, Ethan understood something profound. He was still her prisoner in form, but not in spirit. Together they had faced storms, predators, and political chaos. They had saved lives, repaired systems, and proven that reason and courage could bridge worlds. And beneath it all, a quiet bond was forming. Not romantic, not yet, but something stronger than fear or obligation. A connection forged through trust, respect, and shared struggle. Ethan did not know what the future held. The council would continue to watch, the storms would rage, and the predators would prowl. But he also knew that he had found an ally, a teacher, and perhaps a friend in the most unlikely of places. The journey ahead would be even more dangerous. The final choice to ask between duty and survival, freedom and responsibility, loomed on the horizon. And Ethan Ward, human and steadfast, would face it with the courage and intelligence that had brought him this far. Because in the heart of the storm, he had discovered a truth that no crystal wall or council decree could change. The strength of humanity was not in dominance, but in courage, choice, and the willingness to fight for what was right. And that fight was only beginning. The twin suns of Virelon were setting, casting a blood-orange hue across the crystalline city. Ethan Ward could feel the tension in the air before he even stepped into the council chambers. Word had spread of the earlier confrontation with the rogue factions, and the council's elders were not pleased. They did not see the outcome. They only saw the human who had defied tradition and influenced Sira. Sira led him into the chamber. Her head was high, her steps measured. Every eye in the room turned to him, glowing softly with alien intensity. The council members were tall, regal, and unyielding. Their expressions were a mixture of suspicion, curiosity, and disapproval. One elder, his silver hair flowing like liquid metal, spoke first. "Commander Sira, your actions continue to challenge the laws of our people. This human," he gestured toward Ethan, "has no right to meddle in our affairs. How do you justify his continued presence?" Sira's voice was calm yet carried authority. "He is not here to meddle. He is here to help, to observe, and to offer solutions I could not see alone. His presence has saved lives, stabilized our systems, and proven that cooperation can succeed where strict tradition would fail." The elder's eyes narrowed. "And yet he refuses your offer. He rejects the most sacred practice of our kind. Is this not enough evidence that he is unsuitable to be among us?" Ethan's pulse quickened. He had been prepared for confrontation, but he did not expect to speak before Sira answered. Yet when he saw her gaze, steady and unwavering, he realized she would allow him the choice. She trusted him. "I will speak," Ethan said, stepping forward. His voice was steady despite the weight of the council's scrutiny. "I am human. I have principles. I do not refuse out of disrespect. I refuse because coercion solves nothing. You asked me to act for the survival of your people, and I will help, but not in a way that compromises my choices or morality. If survival depends on freedom and courage, I will fight for both, not just for myself, but for all of you." A murmur spread through the council chambers. Some elders were shocked by his boldness. Others, intrigued, listened carefully. Sira's eyes glimmered faintly. Pride, respect, and perhaps gratitude reflected there. The eldest council member leaned forward, his expression severe. "You speak with conviction, human, but words alone do not sway the council. We require proof. Show us that your presence benefits our people without threatening our way of life." Ethan nodded. He had anticipated this. Over the past weeks, he had studied the planetary systems, repaired failing energy conduits, and worked closely with Sira to improve the health of the Virelians. He began detailing his observations, using clear examples of his contributions. stabilizing the energy grids, preventing further environmental damage, and providing strategies to protect the vulnerable children and elders. Sira assisted, offering her own testimony. His insight is unmatched. His methods are different, yes, but they succeed. I have never seen solutions come so quickly, nor lives preserved so effectively. He does not command, he collaborates. The council listened, some nodding subtly, others still hesitant. Then a younger elder spoke. If the human's methods work and no laws are broken, perhaps his presence is tolerable. But the matter of your refusal remains unresolved. How do you reconcile that, Commander Sira? Sira's gaze fell on Ethan, then returned to the council. We reconcile it by recognizing that survival is not bound by tradition alone. Innovation, courage, and choice matter as much as ritual. I stand by my decision, not to coerce, but to trust in his integrity. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The tension was palpable. Then slowly, one by one, the elders began to speak in favor of Ethan's continued presence. The council could not ignore the evidence, the lives saved, and the strength of the bond between human and commander. It was a subtle shift, a quiet acknowledgement that sometimes the rules of survival could be broader than tradition. After hours of deliberation, the council reached a verdict. Ethan Ward would remain on Virello, not as a captive but as a trusted advisor and ally. He would assist in the survival and prosperity of the Virelians, and his choices would be respected. Sira turned to him afterward, relief and warmth in her silver eyes. You did it. Not by force, not by argument, but by staying true to yourself. That is the courage my people need. Ethan smiled faintly. I only did what I could. You gave me the chance to choose. That made all the difference. The weeks that followed were different from anything Ethan had imagined. He was no longer confined to the chamber. He moved freely within the city, collaborating with engineers, scientists, and administrators. His human perspective brought fresh insight, bridging gaps between Virelian tradition and the practical needs of survival. Sira remained close, not as a captor, but as a partner. Together, they worked on projects to stabilize the planet's ecosystems, to provide food and energy to struggling settlements, and to care for the youngest and oldest Virelians. One evening, as they walked across the glowing terrace of the city, Sira spoke quietly. Ethan, I offered you a choice before. You refused. Yet through that refusal, you have given my people hope. You have reminded us that courage and principle matter. Ethan looked at her, understanding the depth of her words. I did not refuse to hurt you or your people. I refused to act without choice. But I also wanted to help in a way that respected everyone, including myself. Sira nodded, the glow of the city reflecting in her eyes. You are more than I expected, human. More than anyone could have imagined. Their work continued and the city began to change. Energy grids became more efficient, settlements stabilized, and Virelian children grew healthier. Humans and Virelians collaborated, sharing knowledge and skills. And in every challenge, Ethan and Sira were at the center, combining strategy, intelligence, and courage to ensure survival. But beyond the practical accomplishments, something deeper had begun. Respect had grown into trust, trust into companionship, and companionship into an unspoken bond. They did not need to speak it aloud. Their teamwork, their understanding, and their shared struggles said more than words ever could. One day, a crisis struck the northern plateau again. A sudden storm, more violent than any before, threatened the city's energy conduits. Predators emerged and supply lines faltered. Ethan and Sira led a team into the storm, navigating through wind, sand, and lightning. Every decision was critical. One wrong move could endanger lives, but Ethan's calm reasoning, combined with Sira's command and knowledge of the terrain, allowed them to stabilize the conduits and secure the area. The council observed their success, nodding in approval, acknowledging that their combined efforts had saved countless lives. When the storm passed, Ethan and Sira stood together on the terrace, exhausted but unbroken. The twin moons rose over the city, casting their silver light across the buildings and crystal towers. You have proven more than your people asked, Sira said softly. You have proven what it means to be human, to choose, to act with integrity, and to face danger without losing yourself. Ethan looked out over the city, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. And you have shown what it means to be a leader, to balance duty with compassion, to trust even when tradition tells you not to. For a long moment, they simply stood in silence, the hum of the city around them, the wind carrying the faint scent of alien flora. Neither spoke of the past refusals or the early tensions. They did not need to. Their actions, their choices, and their shared experience had already told the story. Ethan knew that his time on Viralon was no longer about captivity. It was about partnership, survival, and understanding. He had been a prisoner once, not of walls or chains, but of circumstance. Now he was free to act, free to choose, and free to make a difference. Sira turned to him with a small, almost imperceptible smile. Tomorrow we begin the next phase. But tonight we rest. You have earned it. Ethan nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace. The danger had not disappeared. The challenges had not ended. But for the first time, he felt that he was part of something greater than himself. A mission not just of survival, but of hope. As the moons climbed higher, casting silver light across Virelon, Ethan realized a truth he had not known when he first arrived. Courage, choice, and integrity could bridge worlds, unite species, and turn prisoners into partners. And though the future remained uncertain, he knew one thing with certainty. He would face it not as a captive, but as a human who had chosen to act, to fight, and to hope. Because sometimes, survival depended not on force, not on compliance, but on the strength to refuse, the courage to stand firm, and the wisdom to work together when the stakes were highest. And in that truth, both Ethan and Sira found a future worth fighting for, together.